Hello, welcome to my vlog. I am going to talk today about concerns that the media has yet to address about Vice Presidential candidate Sarah Palin. The sources to the following facts come from CBS News, Time Magazine, and a website called alternate.org, which cites from other news sources and websites. And while I may not have journalistic credibility to fall back on and to lose, these news sources do. First, I'd like to address the McCain ad, which addresses Palin's Gravina Island Bridge deal, otherwise known as the Bridge to Nowhere, where it claims originally she said no to the legislation. That's not true. She actually went along with the legislation and went against it when it was politically convenient for her governorship. Then she bragged in a speech that she cut over $500,000 from Alaska's budget, but didn't care to note that this is only 2% of its total budget, which is rather pathetic. In addition to this, she did something uncharacteristic to McCain's policies, namely a windfall profits tax towards oil in her state, but only to her state. This is something I'll get into in a minute. Now, the following reasons were why Sarah Palin are not country first, like John McCain tries to promote. In fact, these are cases that she sold out the lower 48 states. Alaska is ranked number 18 in federal taxes paid per resident, whereas it is ranked number 1 in federal taxes spent per resident. The average Alaskan pays $5,434 in federal taxes, and $13,950 of federal taxes are spent on the average Alaskan resident. And then as far as local taxes, Alaska still remains number 1 in taxes spent and paid per resident. The average resident pays 250% of the national average in state taxes, whereas the state spends 200% of the national average on each resident. Alaska also produces 89% of unrestricted revenue from its floor taxes on oil production. Citizens have gotten a check every year of $2,000 from oil revenues, and under Sarah Palin, $1,200 more was passed in light of rising oil prices. This is the windfall profit tax that was good enough for her state, but unfortunately it isn't good enough for the rest of the country apparently. And unbelievably, since the 90s, Sarah Palin has aligned with the Alaska Independence Party, which has moved since the 70s for Alaska to secede from the Union. Now the following is why I consider Sarah Palin a fascist and a hypocrite. In her term as mayor, she sought one of her local librarians for advice on how to go about banning books. When the librarian refused to participate in an act of such totalitarianism, she threatened to fire the librarian. I'll speak for myself, but the thought of this politician swearing to protect the Constitution in the Oval Office brings a lot of concern to me. McCain's praise for her reform against earmark legislation is actually a lie. In the next year alone, her administration proposed 31 earmarked bills at the tune of almost $198 million. Palin's hypocrisy that her pregnant teenage daughter is above her enforcement of teen abstinence is just the beginning, it turns out. She has cut funding for Covenant House Alaska, which is a mixed program of shelters and programs for troubled teens, including pregnant teens. So not only does she oppose teaching teenagers how to avoid pregnancy and lobbying against the right to choose to have the child, she then cuts funding towards a program that cushions the impact of keeping the child by over 20%, leaving pregnant teens with a no-win situation. And despite her vows to fight corruption and useless spending, Palin has abused her power for personal reasons. For one, she refused to pay state license fees for her car wash business that were over a year overdue. Then she was alleged to fire her public safety commissioner for not cooperating in the dismissal of a state trooper that happened to be her brother-in-law, who happened to be persona non grata in her family. But perhaps worst of all is how she recently used the selling of the governor's private jet to cover up her own personal spending indiscretions. During her term as governor, she has charged taxpayers $43,390 for 300 nights of travel that was spent by her husband and her children, along with almost $17,000 spent on per diems for food. I stress again, these funds are set aside for official government business and not personal reasons. And finally, there are ties with the Pentecostal church. There's already a video on this that explains it a lot better than I could. I'm going to leave the link in the box to the right of this. So in essence, John McCain's choice in running mate shows that the commitment to his campaign promises are nothing but bold-faced lies. Sarah Palin has supported Alaska first, not country first, in the dispersion of federal taxes, as well as secession from the Union. They actually support pork barrel spending and earmarked legislation only until it's politically convenient to deny, to which then they arrogantly assume you won't call them out on it. Sarah Palin has proven apathetic to America's oil crisis in exchange for rising profits. and she's a book burner. On top of this, she works towards a no-win situation for pregnant teens, while touting her pregnant teenage daughter as an icon for family values. She abuses her power for personal benefit, and she aligns her political beliefs with this crazy Pentecostal church. But aside from all these facts, I guess she isn't... No, I'm still going to vote for Obama and Biden this November.